Beginning in 1965, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada brought India's wisdom west by translating to English dozens of Sanskrit and Bengali spiritual classics. These books teach the timeless method of bhakti yoga, spiritualizing one's life by simply adding Krishna. These books have greatly enriched my life, and as one of Srila Prabhupada's 4,000 disciples, I enjoy sharing them with others in a practical way. Today I'd like to speak about the relationship between perfection and mistakes and how to reconcile the two in spiritual life. Once a disciple asked Srila Prabhupada how he should feel if he observed the spiritual master making a mistake. Srila Prabhupada said that only God is free of mistakes, and the spiritual master is not God. However, through the spiritual master, one develops a relationship with God. Another disciple commented that the problem appeared to be our misunderstanding of perfection. Prabhupada confirmed that was the case. So what is the actual meaning of perfection in spiritual life? Let's start by distinguishing between material and spiritual perfection. To seek perfection in sports, arts, business, or academics takes commitment and is widely appreciated. Yet even the best baseball players fail to hit the ball successfully 2 out of 3 times. Material perfection is therefore quite subjective. In the Bhagavad Gita 15.16, Krishna says there are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So in this world, every living being is conditioned and therefore subject to various imperfections. In spiritual pursuit, however, there is scope for genuine perfection. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. In this verse from the Gita, Krishna outlines 3 levels of perfection. First, the pursuit. Second, the attainment. And third, understanding Him. Seeking perfection is very rare in any pursuit. Attaining perfection is even more rare, but understanding Krishna is the most rare of all. Seeking spiritual perfection, as Krishna alludes to in this verse, requires a high degree of commitment, but does not bring the same accolades as enjoyed by highly accomplished materialists. As such, those willing to make a sustained spiritual commitment, searching for inner perfection, are far less common. Among thousands who nonetheless seek inner perfection, success is very rare. And how would that perfection appear? The Gita says that such a person would be perfectly detached from anything in this world. Na sochati, na kankshati, no hankering, no lamenting, and equal to everyone. Samat sarveshu bhuteshu. But even that exalted perfection is just a doorway to loving and knowing Krishna. Mad bhaktim labate param. These verses should stretch our limited idea of perfection. How well do we know Krishna? According to the Gita, no other perfection exceeds knowing and loving Krishna. Some perfect devotees are born that way, having taken birth only for the purpose of delivering others. Others perfect their spiritual lives through diligent practice. Still others become perfect by the kindness of a dedicated and qualified teacher who, as Srila Prabhupada said, pounds it into you. Understanding this multi-tiered definition of perfection will help us maintain our faith. Otherwise, we may tend to look at devotees and see that they make mistakes. Then we may question the whole process of Krishna consciousness. If this process is so perfect, how can this person be making mistakes? The Vedas point out that the conditioned soul has 4 defects. He has imperfect senses that lead him to make mistakes in judgments. These mistakes lead him to accept a false notion of his identity and live in illusion. Yet despite all this, he cheats others by asserting he is perfect and trying to get them to believe it. For this presentation, we'll just focus on the first 2 faults: imperfect senses leading to mistakes, Do these two defects still affect an advanced devotee? Suppose an advanced devotee is writing and makes a mistake in spelling or grammar. A nitpicker might say, "Isn't God guiding his every action? How could he make a mistake?" In his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 5th chapter, verse 11, Srila Prabhupada writes, "We know that in our honest attempt for presenting this great literature, conveying transcendental message for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general, as a matter of re-spiritualization of the world atmosphere, is fraught with many difficulties." In this passage we find many grammatical mistakes, and yet they're all made in an honest attempt to promote God consciousness. Is it still perfect? That depends on how we define the word. Perfection lies not in the execution, but in the intent. Here's a chart showing ISKCON's strategic planning for the coming generations of devotees. It centers around maintaining an understanding of Srila Prabhupada's intent through successive generations. The first generation is Srila Prabhupada himself. The second is his disciples, the third his grand-disciples, and the fourth his great-grand-disciples. If Srila Prabhupada's intent is lost, the context of his instructions and eventually the instructions themselves will follow. The main strategy for counteracting this threat is for all devotees to read Srila Prabhupada's books. When Bhaktivinoda Thakur envisioned a worldwide movement for Krishna consciousness, many people complained that because of their imperfections, foreigners could never be Vaishnavas. He disagreed and predicted that from imperfection, perfection will arise. They will make a gradual series of steps towards perfection. If we sincerely want to please God, the mistakes we make along the way will be accommodated in the greater purpose. However, when we make mistakes, we may tend to want to cover them up or blame them on others. How should we devotees deal with mistakes when we make them? Here's one approach called the AIR, or the AIR method. Anticipate mistakes, identify the mistakes, and rectify the mistakes. This is the AIR approach. The first step is to be humble enough to anticipate mistakes. Does this mean having a negative attitude, expecting things will go wrong? Actually, no, it just means being realistic and prepared. Anticipation is the heart of wisdom. If you are going to cross a desert, you anticipate that you'll be thirsty, and you take water. Vedic fire sacrifices end with a mantra in which the priest prays to the Lord, "Whatever mistakes I have made in this event, please forgive them." In the Navajo culture, every rug is made with one deliberate mistake as a way of acknowledging that only God is perfect. As Srila Prabhupada explained to his disciples, only God knows everything. Therefore, mistakes are inevitable. Knowing that in advance makes us humble. If we enter an endeavor knowing that we will at some point most likely have to ask forgiveness from others, that alone will inspire us to treat them respectfully. The second step is to identify exactly what mistakes one has made, as well as their consequences on others. It's important to be specific. Sometimes it takes patience and intelligence to see where we went wrong. For example, do you see any mistakes in this box? Did you notice that the word "thee" is repeated? To understand our mistakes deeply takes a lot of introspection. If we gloss over our mistakes, chances are we're going to repeat them. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks to see Krishna's cosmic form and then, upon seeing it, doesn't like it. His past interactions with Krishna now seem wrong. He says, "My Lord, you should be glorified by everyone who lives, yet I have made offenses. I implore you to forgive. How foolishly I chill with you in friendly conversation, while thinking we were equals, kicking back in relaxation. As cordial people overlook a disrespectful friend, as lovers often disregard remarks that might offend, as parents try to tolerate a coarse, conceited son. Forgive me for these thoughtless things I've ignorantly done. The final step is to rectify our mistakes, a step which includes a sincere apology. An insincere apology might sound like this: mistakes were made, and it is regretful if they hurt you. A person giving a sincere apology is very specific and might say, for instance, I failed to keep my promise to you. A person making an insincere apology might say, I'm sorry if you felt hurt. A sincere apology would sound like, I am sorry I hurt you. How can I make it up? When Lord Brahma tested Krishna by stealing the cowherd boys, he quickly realized it was a mistake. He then returned the cowherd boys, apologized to Krishna for doubting him, begged his forgiveness, and promised to remember his position and serve him. Anticipating, identifying, and rectifying mistakes allows us to be done with them and move on. To hide or ignore mistakes or pretend we didn't make them is harmful for spiritual life. That's the mode of passion. It's also harmful to wallow in guilt or shame over our mistakes. That's the mode of ignorance. To deal with mistakes responsibly and yet with perspective strikes the right balance that characterizes the mode of goodness. Airing out our mistakes will help us lose fear of making them, because we'll know how to deal with them. Is it a good thing to be unafraid of making mistakes? The only way to avoid mistakes is to never do anything, but that's the biggest mistake of all. Once my godbrother Krishna Gopal Prabhu asked Srila Prabhupada, what does it mean to be humble? Prabhupada said, to be bold for Krishna. Boldness does not mean recklessness, but after due consideration with Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, considering all our options, exploring every angle, we need to act decisively and firmly for Krishna. Externally, boldness can mean opening a temple or approaching a stranger with a book or asking for a big donation. Internal boldness is a little more subtle, to take a vow, to improve one's habits, to be honest with oneself. Internally or externally, the point is to act boldly for Krishna without being afraid of mistakes. Roosevelt said, far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. One of the biggest mistakes we make is to find or focus in on the faults of others. When we indulge in that kind of thinking or speaking, we don't see that our own hearts are manifesting their ugliness. In the Bhagavad Gita, 1848, Krishna says that every endeavor is covered by fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. And yet part of us expects everything devotees do should be perfect. Why? When we see faults in others, what we are really seeing is fault in ourselves, the envious, petty, insecure, compassionless side of our conditioning. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes in his bhajan, Amar Jivan, I am an impious sinner and have caused others great anxiety and trouble. I have never hesitated to perform sinful acts for my own enjoyment. Devoid of all compassion, concerned only with my own selfish interests, I am remorseful seeing others happy. I am a perpetual liar, and the miseries of others is a great source of pleasure for me. The nectar of instruction therefore urges us to find out a pure devotee whose heart is completely free of the propensity to find fault with others. Why should we take shelter of such a person? So we can become such a person ourselves. Once a Professor Stahl of California wrote to Srila Prabhupada complaining that his disciples were not representing their tradition very well. Srila Prabhupada replied, if you are looking for fault, you'll find fault because fault is there. But if you're looking for Krishna, You'll also find Krishna, because Krishna is also there. Perfection therefore means to look for Krishna by taking bold steps in his service, introspective about our own faults, and oblivious to or unconcerned about the faults of others. As Lord Chaitanya so succinctly put it, Amanena manadena kirtaniya sada hari. One who offers all respects to others, wanting no respect for oneself, can constantly chant the holy names of God. Now that's perfection.
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Karnapa